This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. And what I'm looking at today is 1995's Mortal Kombat, directed by Simon McCoy. Mortal Kombat was one of the movies Warner Brothers released during the pandemic on HBO Max. In fact, they put their entire 2001 schedule on HBO Max. Quite possibly one of the stupidest decisions ever made, which is why, financially speaking, Mortal Kombat is not a success. It earned $84 million on a $55 million budget. Normally, that's a sign of failure. Now, it could have done very well on HBO Max, but keep in mind, what drives HBO Max is subscriptions. The viewership for Mortal Kombat may have been high, but if it didn't drive increased subscriptions to the streaming service, I'm not sure what that means. But in any case, I hear talk of there being a sequel plan for this. So that's interesting. As I said, I don't quite know what to make of it, but it's interesting. By my reckoning, what's most fascinating about this movie is that there's a metric to compare it to, namely the 1995 Mortal Kombat, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson. And if you're at all familiar with Paul W.S. Anderson, it's through movies like the Resident Evil films, Mortal Kombat, the original Mortal Kombat, Soldier, Event Horizon, and shockingly, the 1995 movie is more enjoyable. Now keep in mind, I said enjoyable, I didn't say better, and that's not an accident. The 1995 movie, as a movie, is not great. The special effects for the time were fine. Now they look, frankly, ridiculous in many instances. So it's not a movie that stands the test of time particularly well. But the 2021 movie, with essentially the same story, while differing in the finer details, is just a slog. It is humorless. It is not as dynamic, not even close to being as dynamic as Paul W.S. Anderson's movie. And as I said, Paul W.S. Anderson's movie is not a great movie, but it's more enjoyable than the 2021 movie, which takes itself way too seriously. And the recent iteration of Mortal Kombat leans more heavily into the violence, oftentimes very gory violence. The greatest problem with this approach, by my reckoning, is that as someone who's not a huge follower of the Mortal Kombat video games, one plays video games because they're challenging, they're engaging. And that's an important word, engaging, because this movie is not engaging. The 1995 movie is. And so it's kind of a bit of a slog to watch. And again, and this is the irony for me, the 2021 movie is better. It's better produced, has better special effects. It is just a better movie. It's significantly less campy, but those things don't work for it in terms of making it more entertaining, because it is not. It takes itself way too seriously. It's almost as if Simon McCoy, the director, forgot that this is based on a video game. It should not be taking itself quite as seriously as this movie does. And even when they're jokes, they ring hollow. It's as if in Mortal Kombat universe, nobody smiles or laughs at anything. And keep in mind, there are jokes in this movie. A few things got a chuckle out of me while watching it, but on the whole, it is grim as death. It is not an enjoyable movie to watch. And this is coming from someone who doesn't mind gore, who likes special effects. But it's just the idea that the movie didn't need to be like this. And that campiness that Paul W.S. Anderson invested in the movie was a good call in retrospect. Because this movie needed something like that. It needed to take itself a bit less seriously. Turn it down a notch. Once again, this is based on a fucking video game. This is not Shakespeare. Lighten up. In fact, if they had lightened the tone somewhat, they could have even have kept the violence, because it would have compensated for it. It needed a bit of camp. It needed a bit of levity, because this movie just falls so flat. And with Warner Brothers management releasing their 2021 slate on HBO Max, a stupid, inane policy. I get that there's a pandemic, but nonetheless, there are other ways this could have been handled. Yet, I think that that may have worked to the benefit of Mortal Kombat, because it is such a drudge to watch. I couldn't see this being successful in theaters, and it wasn't. But, as I mentioned earlier, since it was released during the pandemic, the likelihood is high that that had something to do with it getting a sequel, because I don't see how that could have happened in any other circumstance. So, if you have not seen Mortal Kombat, the 2021 movie, it's currently on Tubi, and it's worth watching. And I say this about a lot of movies, and I mean it, because it's not a terrible movie. It's just a bland, flavorless movie. And as much as I think Paul W.S. Anderson is a hack, having seen another director's vision next to his, he clearly is not as untalented as I like to think sometimes, because his perspective, his take on Mortal Kombat was the better. So what do you think? This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and Review. Do you agree, disagree? Let me know down below. And as usual, consider a like or a follow.